Hello, my name is Debbie Boone, and I want to welcome you to my podcast, The Bend, where we explore how successful people navigated the path and emerged in a better place when life threw them an unexpected twist. It's inspired by one of my favorite sayings: the bend in the road is not the end of the road unless you fail to make the curve. These conversations will hopefully help you and inspire you to embrace your personal bend and to flourish. I hope you enjoy it, and if you need help with your own personal navigation and you're in veterinary medicine, please feel free to reach out to me at Debbie Boone 2 Manage Vets Consulting. Enjoy the bend and be inspired by our wonderful guest. Welcome. Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to The Bend. My name is Debbie Boone, and I am your host today. I'm happy to present to you my friend, Dr. Mark, because Mark and I, we kind of do a little work together with Vitus Vet, and I think we met the first time maybe at a dinner meeting with Andy Rourke.
Yeah.
But Dr. Olcott is a native of upstate New York. He obtained his bachelor's degree from the State University, New York at Genosia. Is that right? Did I pronounce it right?
Yep.
Then he earned his DVM at Cornell and then his MBA from the University of Maryland. He was, after graduation, a partner in several years in a multi-doctor small animal hospital. Then he left and he started his own I'll get this out in a minute, mobile ultrasonography business. And then he worked as an ER veterinarian at a major regional referral hospital where he was named by his peers as one of the top veterinarians in Northern Virginia. Now that's a pretty high honor because that's a highly populated area. So lots of veterinarians up there. Mark also holds multiple patents, which I'm really curious about. He's a published author, which we've seen articles that he's written in many of the veterinary trade journals. He's the co-founder and CEO of Vitus Vet, a rapidly growing company with one simple goal: to improve the connection between veterinarians and pet owners. He lives in Frederick, Maryland, in a very crowded house because he has a wife, 3 kids, 2 cats, 4 dogs, 4 geckos, 3 snakes, and a bunch of fish. I started to count that. I think that's like 17 living creatures.
There's a lot of life.
Without the fish. Without the fish. So welcome, Mark, and thank you very much for spending an hour with us today. I appreciate it. Full disclosure, I do some work with Vitus Vet. I've been a fan since I first was introduced to it for one main reason, as Mark knows. When I was managing hospitals, I managed 24-hour hospital. And one of our greatest challenges was not knowing the patient history when the animals came in on emergency. And Mark set out with Vitus Vet to solve that problem. And so since that very beginning, the first thing that I ever learned about Vitus Vet was that, and he's built and expanded and grown it. But that still, to me, is one of the most important things that Vitus Vet does, because I know I've been in that situation too many times where we just didn't have enough information, and it could have been so helpful to the patient, So Mark, thank you very much for coming on and doing what you do.
Good to see you again.
Yeah. So, so many veterinarians start out when they're young kids wanting to be a veterinarian. And I certainly was one of those that was, determined by a young age that I was going to be a veterinarian. Was that your original goal? Was that how you planned your life?
It was, yeah, really from the start. I mean, my dad was an engineer, so maybe I think in 7th grade, I thought, oh, maybe I'd like to be an engineer. And then I took a mechanical drawing class and didn't do very well in that. So from that moment on, I realized, you know what? I think veterinary medicine is for me. So yeah, I loved science, loved animals. And like many of our colleagues, the idea of people will say, did you ever think about being a human doctor? And no, not even for 1 second. Like, I think, what is it? Vet Girl on the Run. I saw Justine's got some great shirts that say on the back, veterinary medicine because humans are gross.
Humans are gross. Yeah. I think Bill Schroeder had some of those too for In Touch. And, and me, I'm a communication coach. So I said, well, I really think I would have liked to have changed it just by one word and say human stuff is gross, because veterinary medicine is a people business, as
Yeah.
we learn rapidly after getting out of school. But yeah, I don't want to handle people stuff. You know, a dog can throw up, I can clean that up. Somebody human, I'm over there heaving just like I can't handle it. That's why I don't have any kids, because kids are a mess. I can't handle it. So Mark, tell me what path you followed. I mean, obviously, you know, went to Cornell Vet School, and were you, I mean, just from that area, so was that an in-state student thing for you, or did you move away from home? And
No, I did. I grew up outside Albany, New York. And as you mentioned, I went to one of the state schools in New York out near Rochester, SUNY Geneseo, for 4 years. And then I was pretty unique when I got to Cornell in that I was in the minority as far as students that had gone right from college to vet school. I think that's maybe something that's expanded since then, but for my class, it was unusual. There were a lot of people that took a gap year or worked for a couple of years, then applied. But I went right from college to vet school and um, graduated in 1995. And I knew that I'd had enough of the upstate New York winters at that point. And I came out of veterinary school wanting to be an equine veterinarian. So I applied all throughout kind of the mid-Atlantic area and got a job in Montgomery County, Maryland as a horse vet. So I did that for a couple of years. That's what brought me south from New York here to Maryland, and I've been here ever since.
yeah, you really are in horse country up there. I
Yeah.
grew up in Burlington and Greensboro area of North Carolina, and it's right there on the Virginia border. So lots of big horse farms up there. And the last practice I managed was mixed animal, and we had 4 vets that did, you know, it was primarily equine work. They would do some cattle stuff too, but and unusually an ostrich in the work for the zoo. So there was a local zoo. But yeah, it's, you know, equine and large animal work is kind of fun because you get to ride around in trucks,
I love it. Yeah.
rarely see the client. You spend a whole lot, especially with equine, like trainer barns and stuff. There's the people who handle them all day long. And
Yep.
you go out, I mean, we go out and vaccinate 200 horses in a day.
Mhm.
I think your biggest challenge for all that is getting paid for the work.
Yeah, it's a tough life. Nothing ever goes wrong with horses at noon. The colics, the foaling, it's always 2 a.m.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah.
and I had I won't say I have back problems, but I knew after a couple of years of equine practice that I didn't have a 30-year career of digging out warm blood abscesses in the Maryland summertime heat. I just knew that it wasn't going to happen. I had an opportunity to switch to small animal practice in 1997, jumped at it and never looked back.
Mhm.
So that's kind of a theme of my career. I call it intellectual wanderlust. I'm very curious, lifelong learner, and like to do different things. Also, kind of a lifelong entrepreneur.
Yeah.
When I look back over my life, I started my first business when I was in junior high, and my bus stop was a candy store. So I would go in and buy gum and blow pops and all the other stuff, and then bring them into school and sell them in homeroom. you know, and use the 50 cents, the dollar here and there to, buy cool knives and other stuff that 12-year-old boys love.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It was about seeing an opportunity, and even still to this day, even fast forward to, as you mentioned, my experience as an emergency vet and seeing a problem and wanting to solve it is really kind of what it's about.
Mhm. Now you moved from the small animal I mean, equine to small animal, and that's a fairly common transition. Just like physically, sometimes the veterinarians just you realize how difficult that work is. And yeah, one of my large animal vets used to say, you know, you can't kill a cow, but you can look at a horse and it'll kill over dead. And it's about the truth. They're just fragile and beautiful.
Yeah.
And that was kind of my goal too. I was a horse girl growing up, and I had saddlebreds, and I wanted to be an equine vet. And then, you know, the realities set in after 4 years of undergrad. I went, I don't want to do that.
I had a lot of classmates in vet school that recognized that too. And one of the things I learned after a couple of years is this is a bit of a simplification, but not really. You can either work on them or ride them. You know, a
Right.
lot of people who want to be are horse folks that think, oh, I want to be my daughter, for example, right now. She wants to be an equine vet. Okay. But, you know, very often at the end of that busy day in May of vaccinating and all the foalings and whatnot, the last thing you want to do is saddle up and ride your dressage horse.
Yes.
So, what very often happens is people will say, they pick one, you know, so they'll transition to small animal practice as a job, and then the horses become their avocation.
Mm-hmm.
That do you see that too,
I
Debbie? That
do see
people pick
that. I
one?
do see that too, because you're right. I mean, you can, and horses, horses are like a boat, they're just, they're a hole you throw money in, right?
Yeah.
And so being a veterinarian gives you a good plus on being a horse owner. But just because the work itself, from what I've seen, like I said, I had 4 large animal veterinarians and they were rotating shifts. They were out in the night. They were working long days out, driving around for a 50-mile radius from the hospital. And when did they have time to ride? Even though several of them did own horses and did show, it was still only because there were 4 of them, I think, that they were able to manipulate their schedules enough to accommodate that stuff. But if
Yeah.
you didn't have that many veterinarians in your group, and there were 11 doctors in our hospital group, then it was going to be almost impossible for you to spend time enjoying your horse for pleasure, and working on top of all that too. So when you were in the small animal, and obviously you became a partner there,
Mhm.
um, and what made you transition out of that? Because one of the goals of so many veterinarians is to be a partner in a practice, because that's one of the ways, especially for young new grads, to come out and pay off all that student loan debt. So
Yeah.
what was the curveball that changed your path there?
It was a curveball and probably something a lot of people go through. Candidly, it was a divorce.
Ah,
Yeah, a classmate of mine, another common thing, classmates in vet school get married. And we bought the practice together. We were partners in it. And I ended up selling my half of the practice to her. We get along great. We have a child together who's now a freshman in college, which is crazy. But that's when I moved on and did the mobile ultrasound practice. I'd always had a real interest in ultrasound all the way back to vet school when the ultrasound machines took up the whole room.
oh yeah.
It's an incredible diagnostic modality if you know how to use it.
Hmm.
And so I transitioned to the mobile ultrasonography and had an interest in cardiology. Almost, in fact, one of my articles I published was I was on a path to try and do a cardiology residency.
Hmm.
I was really interested in that, but I had a young family, and it just the cardiology residency wasn't in the cards, and that's what they another curveball. I'm not even sure you know this, Debbie, but I'm another unique thing about me is I actually went back and did an internship after several years in practice,
Really?
which was fascinating. Really
Oh,
interesting to go back and do an internship after being out of school for 7 years. And
yeah, yeah.
oh,
Because
I
I
learned so
think
much.
sometimes, yeah, sometimes interns I feel are in such a state of overwhelm just because of school.
Yep.
But then as kind of an adult learner, to go back
Mhm.
to it with the maturity of 7 years of practice, that would be very different. And I would imagine probably a higher level of learning and value.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Because, I find sometimes I tell students, and I like you, I've talked to a lot of the VBMAs, and I said, look, unless you want to be a specialist, you really don't need an internship. You need a mentor, and
Mhm.
don't waste your money and don't waste a year of your livelihood doing that, because I've seen so many times that interns are basically just cheap labor,
Yeah.
and they're glorified technicians. They're not allowed to do anything. And I think that the learning that in some of the programs that's there's think they're going to get, is not there.
Yeah.
So getting out into a practice with good practitioners who will let you do stuff, who will sit by you and go through your charts and talk to you through cases, is much more valuable, and you get paid for it, and you get paid for it. And
Yeah.
that was sort of the way we did our practice. We had almost all new graduates that worked for us. We like to raise them right, is what we said,
Yeah.
and take advantage of that. Now, if you don't mind, I would like to roll back to the divorce, because so many times, especially as a consultant, I see couples who are where you are, and either they are partners in the practice together, or one's the manager and one's the owner. And I think there's some challenges there always, because for me, the staff gets stuck in the middle sometimes.
It can, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
if you
You
feel like
try not to let it happen, but it's inevitable. I mean,
yeah,
one of the lessons I learned, and this is true for really any business, is you shouldn't own a business with somebody 50-50. Someone should have 51% or more, because otherwise, if something goes wrong, what do?
yeah,
You can't make somebody do something. So that
mhm,
was a lesson learned for really, and that's true of any business.
mhm,
You know,
yeah, yeah.
if you
My
can,
my first practice owner, I laughed. I told him, I said I was very blessed to have him as practice owner, because he was an unusual thing in veterinary medicine. He was an excellent practitioner and a really exceptional business person. So I learned how to run a practice efficiently. But one of the things he always said was, the more partners you have, the more difficult it becomes to make a decision. And so he would never have any partners, and he would say, I will sell to my associate, but I will not have him as a partner until I get ready to walk out the door, because it takes too long to make a decision. And the decision is right or wrong or mine, but I'm going to make one. I'm going to make it, to the best of my knowledge, rather than having to deal with it. And, I deal with a lot of partnership frustrations, because even then, even if they're not 50-50, nobody set the rules out. Nobody said, this is what you're going to do, and I'm going to do this part. And then there's resentment, because one ends up bearing a greater burden than the other.
yeah,
And then there's a lot of resentment about that. One practices more, one, doesn't do any of the billing, one doesn't do any of the financial stuff, or doesn't even want to be involved in that. So it gets to be really challenging sometimes. But I think that, understanding that the manager coming in, and you and I, we do a lot of work with managers, and we do a lot of webinars with Vitus Vet, and we got a really good one coming up pretty soon. But the managers get stuck in the middle, or the staff gets stuck in the middle, if the owner partner is the manager, because who do you go to complain about the boss, or who do you go to complain about the manager? You can't do either one of those things. So sometimes the dynamic is a little tough. When it works well, it works great, because both parties are so vested in the success of the practice, but that can be a little challenging.
for sure.
Um, so when you were, launching this ultrasound business, was that a little nerve wracking? I mean, obviously you were coasting along, and all of a sudden life throws you a curve, and now you got to start another new business.
Yeah, it was right when ultrasound. This was probably the, let's say, early 2000s, let's say, and ultrasound was starting to take off. But I had a lot of interest in it. I was doing 4 or 5 CE courses a year in this, so I was very clear that I wasn't a radiologist or cardiologist. In fact, that's one of the things, the outcomes of my internship was learning just how good those folks are.
Oh yeah.
The difference between somebody who has an interest in surgery and a surgeon, or someone who has an interest in cardiology and a cardiologist, is huge. Having worked with both, and that was an interesting look back. You go back after 7 years in practice, and you think you know a little bit about cardiology until you start talking with a cardiology and a cardiologist. It's next level. you
It
know,
truly is. It
so
truly.
you really, one of the outcomes of a successful internship, I think, is you learn when to refer. You learn what you can't do.
Mhm.
And you talked about mentorship. That, I think, is another thing, no matter what you do. And to the extent I've been successful in these pivots in life, it's been about finding a mentor. And I was blessed in my internship to have a fantastic mentor, Mike Walters, who's a criticalist who now runs one of the big VCA hospitals on the West Coast. He's a great friend, still a mentor. We talk frequently. And I've just been blessed in my life to have people. I mean, I've also sought them out. That's another thing. I don't fall in your lap, right?
Yes. Well, and that is a great point to make, because I think a lot of times, especially listening and interviewing young veterinarians who are graduating, they're very interested in having a mentor. But what they have to realize is this is a two-way street.
Mhm.
So as you said, I sought them out. I was proactive there in my own education. And I'm assuming, because I know you, that when they gave you feedback, even if it was uncomfortable, you listened.
Yeah.
And you rather than thinking, oh my gosh, this is I'm perfect, and only the feedback that's supposed to come into me is positive.
Oh boy.
Mentors are, I laugh and I think, let me tell you, let me ask you what you think about this, because in my mind, a good mentor is kind of like the mother dog, and the mother dog corrects her puppies. If they start to get out of hand, she turns around and she'll do a quick nip, and then she'll bathe them and they'll be soothed. But there's always a correction that says this is the rules of the house, this is the rules of behavior. And I think that sometimes young people who want mentors only want good feedback, and they don't want negative feedback, but you got to take the bad with the good.
For sure. Right. Otherwise, what are you going to really learn? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you get yourself wrapped into one of these confirmation bias echo chambers. If all you ever hear is good, you can develop a pretty big blind spot, and blind spots are what get you.
Mm-hmm. You're absolutely right. It is the curveball that
Mhm.
that you look up and you say, "Oh, I never saw it coming. I never
Right.
saw that coming." Now, when you were deciding to, start multiple businesses, because it's not just going the ultrasound, you've done several businesses now. What's your decision making process to say, I'm going to start something new. I'm going to take this chance. I'm going to learn something different. I'm going to go out into the world. I'm going to take a risk.
Yeah, I guess, but part of it is to what extent do you have a tolerance for risk? I think you can mitigate that by taking small steps initially. I've learned over the years, one of the tenets of product management and software development, they call it 330-300. So release a feature or a tool to three people, gather some feedback. Does it work? What would you like to improve? Iterate on that, then let 30 people deal with it. Same sort of thing. Then finally, 300, adding an order of magnitude every time, just because it's a great way of releasing things and minimizing the likelihood that you missed something significant.
Mm-hmm.
So, same thing with starting a business. I had pretty good idea that I could um, support myself doing the mobile ultrasound. One of the other nice things about the mobile lifestyle is minimal fixed costs, right? So you do some pro forma analysis and what's my break even? How many scans do I need to do to make the payment for the ultrasound machine and that kind of thing. And then it just grew from there. Which also one of the outcomes of that was by the time I went back to emergency practice and sold my ultrasound machine, I was in and out of 40 different veterinary practices. And I had a pretty good idea of the way things went in a number of different practices, from really successful ones to ones that were really struggling. And it was a great learning experience for me that I've taken in my career since then, especially the Vitus Vet. Having an idea of there's all different. There's a whole bell-shaped curve of practices out there.
It is amazing. I know that, I managed my first practice for 19 years, and it was my first job in veterinary medicine. And I started as a part-time receptionist in two practices because there was a satellite practice. So I worked in the satellite practice in the morning and the mothership in the afternoon. But when I started consulting, I kind of had the idea that most practices ran similar to the practice that I was running. And then when I started getting out into the world, like you said, you go, oh my gosh, some of the things that to me as a business person were so obvious,
Yeah.
that needed to be fixed were completely just looked over in these practices, or they didn't have any idea how to fix them. And then there were things that I thought, oh, I wish I had known that, because that's really great. And I would have taken that. I've always talked about senior sales reps, and so many practice managers and owners never spend any time with sales reps, but they don't use them to their advantage. They just, think that they're there to sell them products. But the truth of the matter is, just like you said, those sales reps have been in 40, 50, 60
Yep.
hospitals, and you have tunnel vision because you've been in one. So I would sit with my sales reps and ask them, what they were seeing out there in the world and what I could steal and what was working well, what wasn't working. And because I built those relationships with them, then they were more than willing to help me, to
Yeah.
figure out stuff that I needed to work on. So it is about relationships, and that's the kind of the next question. I wanted to talk to you about, because there's a challenge that comes with making change, and everything is uncomfortable in 2020. Oh Lord. 2020 threw us change after change after change and made us incredibly uncomfortable. So just tell me how you manage the discomfort of change.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I think knowing that it's I was telling my son when he went away to college, I think the people who are really hit by homesickness are the ones who expect that they won't be. If you're open to the idea that change is just going to happen. I mean, I've had a lot of change in my life, so you expect it, maybe it doesn't hit you quite as much, or you're willing to hit it head on. I think with the remote nature of work. I mean, we've gone to being pretty much fully remote, but we've utilized a lot of technology tools, Zoom being one of them, Slack, a lot of connection tools. And I think that's one of the lessons I learned in business school that's only been confirmed in running the software company is communication is so very important. And one of the beauties of software is that it's about productivity. You know, it's not a lot of folks in our profession will look at tools like that as an expense rather than as an investment in productivity.
Mm-hmm.
We're seeing that now with curbside and how crazy it is in some
Oh,
practices.
yeah.
Well, you know, could you simplify your life by texting? Something simple like that, you
Just,
know.
yeah.
You hit on that
Simple fixes
topic. In
easy.
fact, I wrote a little note down about how not only back to your point about how some people have only worked in one practice, one great experience about business school for me was a lot of us have only worked in veterinary medicine.
Yes.
So one huge eye opening for me going back to business school and learning about how far behind we were when it comes to those tools. And
Yes.
it's not cute anymore, you know?
Well, this year, I think it compressed 10 years of advancement into about a year
Yeah.
because we had to. We
Yeah.
were forced to adapt. And I'm a technology fan, and but not, I mean, I laughed. I told Sean Wilkie yesterday, we were having a discussion because Talkatoo is a talk to text dictation tool, and I've been using it for the last week or so and just loving this thing because I was having a conversation with a brand new client, and rather than having to just take notes, I just sat the mic up there and dictated our entire conversation for review. And like every time I turn around, I find a new use for this. But for veterinarians, using that tool to make chart notes and get home on time. I mean, just, to make you happier in life. But, to me, technology is a tool. And much like if I had, if I needed to screw a screw into the wall, I would go get a screwdriver, but I could use a power drill and get it done in half the time.
Right.
So why not use the power drill and go on and do something else? And I think sometimes we look at, but the power drill is expensive. Yeah, it's expensive, but in the time that I finish drilling 5 holes, I have more than utilized my time to pay for the power drill. And now I can go and utilize that extra time to make some money, to drive revenue.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's a very that's a business mindset as opposed to that short-sighted, let me go paint the wall. I'm a veterinarian, but let me go paint this closet kind of mindset, because we do think we can do everything in veterinary medicine. And I'm not saying I haven't fallen into that trap, because I've painted my share of walls and changed ceiling tiles and folded laundry and all kinds of stuff in a veterinary hospital. But it's not the smartest thing to do, unless you're flat broke. And then, yeah, okay, then you might have to bootstrap. But when you get to the point where you can pay other people to do what their expertise is, then pay other people to do what their expertise is.
Yep.
Yeah. So, Mark, I mean, obviously we met through networking, but the success of Vitus Vet, I mean, I think you told me how many users does the app have now, or does the format have?
Oh, it's coming up on the actual app itself, probably 1 million, although we've got probably 15 or so million pets in the system just from
Wow.
all the practices that we
Yeah.
work with.
15 million pets. That's a lot. That's a lot. So how did networking help you get to that scale?
It's a small industry.
Mhm.
You know, it is, I think, vets listen to vets. And I think that's been something that we've been able to capitalize on that. I've been there. As I said, I started cleaning cages when I was 14 years old. I know what the difference is between veterinary practices and other businesses. I know the differences between emergency practice and general practice, the differences between being an associate and an owner. All these sorts of things give us kind of a unique lens to look on the profession, but then also trying to get engaged and give back, whether it's vet partners, or I had the privilege of serving on the AVMA's Veterinary Economic Strategy Committee for 6 years, which is an incredible opportunity to look at some of the high level issues affecting our profession, whether it's student indebtedness, or how can we better use pet insurance to drive better outcomes for veterinarians and pet owners and pets as well. Serving on the board of my vet school's alumni association. So just trying to give back. I think that's where my spirit, or what drove me to do this, wasn't so much because I'm a power introvert. So for me, it's not about going and meeting a bunch of more people than that would really energize me. That's not it. It's more like, despite getting over your comfort zone and trying to learn, trying to give back to a profession that's done so much for me. So taking yourself to zones of uncomfort, that's where the growth opportunities are.
I love the fact that you said you were a power introvert,
Yeah.
because that describes so many people in our profession. Not me, but so many people in our profession. As you know, I'm the social butterfly whose wings have been clipped this year. And
Mm,
it's killing me because I don't get out and get to see all the people that I normally meet, greet, have dinner with, and drinks and enjoy. But it just says to me that no matter what your personality style, if you find value in what you're doing, and if you feel strongly enough about the purpose behind it, that you will go out of your comfort zone to do things. And I remember the very first talk I gave in front of a fairly large group. And I don't think I slept all the night before. And I thought I was going to throw up. And as I was hanging onto the podium, trying not to faint, and hoping that people wouldn't know that I was going to pass out at any minute. And then, as with practice, it gets better. And so even if you are highly introverted, you can practice the skills that it takes to get out there and meet people and network and make connections, um, and find opportunities, because I think the network is where the opportunity lies.
that's right.
Um,
Yeah.
we are both members of Vet Partners, which is the Association of Consultants and Advisors to the veterinary profession. Um, I sit on the board, and I've been doing some committee work with them for a while, and some other advisory boards and associations. And I really do find that it's first of all, it's fascinating to know people who don't fit in your bucket, but they have their own. And then you get a perspective that you wouldn't normally get, seeing other people and looking at the world of veterinary medicine through their eyes rather than yours.
Hmm.
Because I have a tendency to see it always as management, eyes. And I'm sure you see it as veterinary eyes, but also practice owner eyes and technology advisor eyes. But there are people out there who see, things as a CPA. And it would behoove us to pay attention to how the CPAs see our business, because they will make ourselves a better business, by doing those things. So it is so much of those connections, and having people help you reach your goals when they believe in what you believe. They think you have a good idea, and they're there to help you. And I will ask your experience, because I certainly know mine is, so many people have helped me along the way because they just wanted to, you know?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I've been, as I mentioned before, you have to seek it out, but a lot of people are very willing to help. And, if you ask them, and if you don't waste their time and find people that are maybe experts in an area that you're not, identifying gaps. That's one of the big things that, we learn in business school, is that, how do you form a team? Because it's really all about the team and who has strengths that complement your strengths and weaknesses and whatnot.
Yeah.
Uh, but
Hire those people who are your weaknesses.
yeah,
Just make sure you have those on your team and they are following your purpose and you have a common goal there. So, Mark, obviously, there's been a lot of decisions in your career path, and I do want to ask you one question. So, when you started Vitus Vet, that is just really not a typical veterinary path. I mean, to start a technology company, how did you get the idea, and how did you put that team together?
yeah, I was, as an emergency vet, I had grown very frustrated with the lack of after hours medical record access. And, I had patients die from this. I had pet owners having to spend a lot of money repeating a vomiting and diarrhea workup that had just been done at noon right down the road. I can see that general practice from here, but I can't access their records. And it just bothered me, you know. But I also knew that I would never do anything about it if I didn't get some help. And again, factoring in the wanting to be a lifelong learner, I decided, let me go back to business school and learn about how to solve a problem like this. And it was there that I met my co-founder, Cal Pesh, who was a software guy, wasn't even a pet owner, but had made a career out of solving problems using technology. And when I go back and I talk to students, or if I'm um, talking to younger folks in the profession, that's something I really try and stress, is if you have an idea, or if your idea is in an area that's not exactly your area of expertise, find somebody that does have, that plugs that gap. Whether, if in most software companies you need a technology co-founder, someone who is an expert in writing code and building apps and so forth, that get yourself off the ground. So it was really a blessing to me to meet people um, in business school that had that level of expertise that I didn't, because we have in this profession very much a curse of knowledge, right? We do, as you say, we assume that everybody knows what we know. And while on the one hand, we view it as um, as a really good thing that you started cleaning cages when you were 14, on the flip side, that really also can create some pretty big blind spots.
It does.
So
It does.
that's how you do find yourself with a technology gap in your practice. And I think you're right. COVID has accelerated um, the use, or the viewing of technology as a productivity tool and not an expense.
Yes, yes. Well, I thought it was interesting that we were talking about the AVMA economics, because I attended the economic summit this year virtually. And all the practices that I speak with and read about are all, oh, we're just so busy. We're so busy. But when you look at it in terms of numbers of patients seen or appointments, you find out they're not that busy compared to where they normally are. But what they are is very inefficient, because all their systems and routines are gone, and running back and forth to the car and curbside care has taken twice as much time as typically. But there's so many opportunities, and this is our webinar coming up, I think the 27th of January, I think is the date of it. With our panelists are some practice managers who have utilized technology to create efficiencies in curbside care. And I hear so many interesting and creative uses of technology to streamline that process. Some vets have even used tablets by having two tablets, one in the exam room, one in the uh, giving it to the owner in the car, opening Zoom for them, because we have clients with technology limitations, let's put it that way. And they just do it for them. And then they do the physical exam and all the care just as if they were in the room. So it solved some of that back and forth phone call chasing, text message chasing, clients driving away chasing, stuff that's happened just because we're using a couple of tablets efficiently and bringing them in and out of the building. So, and nobody drives off with them. Why? Because you exchange them for the pet.
Mm.
While you have the pet inside, they have the tablet, and then you switch it out. But those are creative things that a lot of people are so busy that they don't have time to think creatively. And I think that's something that busyness and efficiency or good work are two different things, because busyness just keeps you running so hard that you don't have time to do creative thinking and problem solving. And then when you do step back, when you do create those boundaries, when you create and schedule space, then that's when you get to think. That's when you have the ideas that say, oh, my brain can problem solve because it's not putting out fires all the time. And that's a difficult space to discipline yourself as a manager or an owner to get to, but you have got to do that. And I'd love for you to speak to that, because you are a business owner, but you've also worked in practice as an owner. Do you believe the space is important?
Very much so. Yeah, for me, it's being outdoors with the dogs, letting them run around, or being out in nature is a really an area, especially as an introvert, that allows me to sort of clear my thoughts, and that's where some of my best ideas have come from, about how to, yeah, solve a problem that you might be facing. To your point, I mean, let's just talk about texting, for example. And one of the other things we're seeing right now is the is employee turnover challenge, right? Because who, not many, my guess is that when people applied to work at your animal hospital, especially for a CSR role, they probably weren't envisioning spending 70% of their time on the telephone. That's not what they had in mind. And if that continues, then they're going to burn out. That's not what they want. They leave. Especially, millennial. A lot of is made of millennials and younger, but telephone is not where it's at. And just think of it. I was at the VBMA roundtable this weekend as well, and one of the things we talked about is, I asked the question, how many phone calls can a CSR manage at one time? Probably one, let's say. How many text threads can you manage at one time? Probably 5 or 6, right? Especially if they're used to it. They're doing it all day.
Mm-hmm.
And your client probably doesn't want to call you on the phone either. They may be at work, or they know, oh, last time I got put on hold, it was a nightmare. So it really is a win-win to just use technology like that, just to reduce the number of phone calls, reduce front desk chaos. I find it interesting that a lot of practice owners and managers that spend all day, even some older folks, boomers, that are, they're texting with their family, yet they haven't thought, do you think maybe your clients might want to text with you? Or, is that, think about the second or third order effects of this.
Mm-hmm.
That, yeah, you'd have to set up a system. It's pretty easy to do that. But once they do, especially with ours, if it's integrated with your practice management software, and I can have that, you probably saw this too. When I was in practice, here's what would happen on my surgery day. I would do a dental, I would recover the patient. I'd want to call the owner, tell them how it went. I'd inevitably get voicemail because it was business hours, right? I'd leave a detailed long message, hang up, go to scrub in on the next procedure, and guess who calls? Right? I
Absolutely.
can't talk to them then, so they leave a message back, and
Yeah. Phone tag all
both
day.
of us. A
Mm-hmm.
picture, a text, come pick her up at 5 o'clock. She did great. Gets dumped into your PIMS. Win-win.
Done. All done. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And then you can even text the take home instructions out to them. Yeah. So they actually get it at a time. And then the other members of their family can read the same thing,
Sure.
because that's the other thing that happens is you instruct them and they get home and they try to explain it to their spouse or somebody else in their household. And then you get the other, my wife tried to explain this to me. I don't get it. I need to talk to the vet. I need to talk to the tech. And then there's a redundancy of the stuff that we're talking about when we could use tech to just solve that problem. And even if it was, of course, I'm a proponent of video, very visual. Obviously, this is why I'm doing a podcast. But even being able to do show and tell video of how to pill your cat. My mom's cat was just diagnosed last week with diabetes. And so she's just now learning how to give insulin to her cat, which fortunately is a very chillaxed cat, and she's 87. But a video would be so easy for her to see and mimic, as opposed to trying to translate this from writing to how to physically do that. So there's a lot of opportunity for us to take it to the next step, which is more visual than just writing stuff, just typing stuff.
what we're talking about here is we're in a transition phase of our industry where many practices say they're client service oriented, but those same practices will have a bounce back email that says, we'll try and get back to you within 48 hours.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
Amazon doesn't do that. Uber doesn't do that. You name it. We're still a doctor convenience focused industry.
Yeah.
And that needs to change. I mean, look at our business hours. I mean, I get it that people want to have lives, but if they're closing at 6:30 or 7, at least here in DC, people don't even get home till then.
I've been in the traffic in DC. You're just still sitting in traffic at that
Yeah.
time of day up there.
So don't that's not client service
No,
oriented. Not
no,
really.
you got to think of what my clients would want. And
Right.
that's really how I managed my practice. I talked a lot about hospitality in a lot of my classes because I grew up in the restaurant business and I learned hospitality thinking from my parents, and always the hospitality says, what can I do to make you happy? How would it feel to be that customer sitting in that booth, eating this meal, being served this way, having to wait in line? How can I entertain them? How can I get, realistic expectations for them? And so when I managed the practice, that's what I knew and that's what I brought to it. So we really had more hospitality leanings, which of course created greater trust in our client base than just this transactional base, which says I come in, I get my dog shots, and I leave. So I'm still thinking in that mindset is, what if I were a client? What would I like? What would make me comfortable? And one of the most uncomfortable things that we teach clients to do is some of the take-home care and medication, the way that medication has to be given. How can I make them more comfortable with that? And I think that video is another good way to do that. And training. I mean, right now, the other thing is we are incredibly shorthanded in every practice that I've had conversations with. And somebody said the other day, well, how am I going to train new people? Because I only have like 2 people that even know what they're doing. I know what video, the rock stars, and then use that video and give it to the new people. And then that, you've multiplied your rock star. They can do patient care while somebody else is, they're teaching somebody else how to put your spay pack together. So
Right.
why in the world not use the technology that we have? I mean, it's
Yeah,
just,
right. They're force multipliers,
yeah.
whether it's the example of texting I use for the front desk or the video, record it once, and you can use it 1,000 times.
Mhm. Exactly. Exactly.
And to extend on that, I think another benefit of business school for me was learning about those other industries and how can we learn from other verticals. I think, for example, veterinary practices have a lot more in common with restaurants than with physician practices, for
I,
example.
I agree.
The business model is completely different. You're
Mhm.
right about the hospitality. As it gets more competitive, we're going to have to be better and better at that because we will have to.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we also need to use that hospitality with our team because
Mm.
we can't afford to throw away people.
Yeah. Train them for 6 months. Just when they're starting to be valuable, they leave. Yeah, you can't.
Mhm.
That's a
Yeah.
killer.
Yeah. Some of the people that I hired at my very first practice are still there. I left there in 2005 to pursue other interests and actually a lot more money, but those people enjoy the practice and they have a great culture and they are still there. And
Great.
that makes the clients feel comfortable because people love consistency. They want to see that same face. They want that person who raised their dog with them over 10 years to be at that front desk and to
Yep.
be in that exam room, to be in that treatment room with their pet all that time. And when you have a lot of turnover, it makes people feel uncomfortable. And that again is something I learned from my family's restaurants because we had people who worked with us for 30 years or more. And the clients or the customers would come in, and I laughed because we had on Wednesday chicken pie. Now, if you don't know what chicken pie is, it's a Southern thing, but it is really, really good.
I do
And
not know.
all of ours was
I
homemade.
think about it.
Yeah. Yeah. So everything was homemade, but chicken pie was a big day. It was Wednesday, and the customers would come and their servers would see them standing in line waiting for a table and know that they would ask for their specific waitress. They would have their orders ready and sitting on the table with their drink before they ever got seated because they knew it was chicken pie day, what they were going to order with it. and what
Wow.
they would have to drink. And so the people who had 30 minutes for lunch got to sit and enjoy their lunch because their server was proactively thinking ahead and had their food ready without even being ordered.
Absolutely.
So that's the kind of service that we need to be giving to our clients. And if we don't, we're really going to struggle. I know that there's a great demand, um, a lot of corporate takeover, a lot of competition out there with online pharmacies and other providers. Walmart comes into the space. You and I've had that conversation before. So how do you serve people so well that they will actually pay you a premium to come to have you care for their pet? Because they will,
Yeah.
you know.
It's doing the little things well is really important. I mean, there are some things that Walmart can do very well. There are some things they just cannot do very well. That has to be your practice's model. As you said, we have to be really service oriented, to get back to our roots of the way practice was 30 years ago. Um, yeah, I think one of the slides I showed yesterday to the VBMA folks was a slide about client loyalty. And there are two components of that. And one of them is value, right? How are we giving value? And we talk a lot about that. But the other component of it was accessibility. How do you make yourself more accessible? Because if you're not that accessible, whether it's 40% of the people who call you get put on hold, then that we'd like our relationship with our clients to be this chain or a steel cable, but in many instances it's just this wispy thread. And I think the far bigger threat to our practices is not so much the new practice down the road or the corporate practices. It's your clients who love you, but they haven't been in 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because it's pretty bit difficult to do business with you.
It's hard to do business with you.
Accessibility is a problem.
Yeah.
Even before COVID, like checkout is also a nightmare. People are busy. They want to get home. I don't want to water ski behind my two labs and check out. And here comes someone who just
Exactly.
euthanized their pet and I've got to pay. I just want to walk out. I just want to, how do I just leave? Like some of the companies in the restaurant space are innovating, like
Mm-hmm.
Toast, with I scan the QR code on my receipt, I add the tip, I walk out.
And walk out the door.
That's cool.
Exactly right.
People are
Yeah.
busy.
And for the
Especially at our
people who
price
don't
point.
want that, that's okay. For the people who don't want that, they can stand at the front desk, they can have a conversation with the team, and we'll pamper them just like they want. But it's all about creating a custom customer service experience, because you, as an introvert, may not want to spend a bunch of time up there chatting me up, but you've got you're a business owner, you got stuff to do. So let me be very efficient and nice, but very efficient with you. And for that other customer who wants to spend a little time there catching up and, like Old Home Week, well, I'll do that for you too. But we don't give everybody the same experience. We have to pay attention and listen to people and give them what they need and not what we think they should have. And I think that's going to be one of our big keys. Yeah. And the balance of that is, how do we do it and still set boundaries for ourselves? Because if you're talking about accessibility and you're a one doctor practice and somebody wants you at midnight, that, you got to find an alternate for that. But the alternate is telemedicine. There's plenty of people out there who can take that burden for you from closing to opening the next day and still satisfy your client because they've gotten an answer to their question. So I think there's more opportunity out there to serve people 24/7 than us thinking we have to physically do it ourselves. There's other opportunities, there's other technologies, there's other workarounds that we could do that. Well, Mark, I appreciate your time. So any final words of wisdom as a business owner looking into 2021? Where do you see 2021 going? What are your strategic planning thoughts?
Yeah, I think that the practices will increasingly get back to normal as the number of vaccines roll out and so forth. Will probably curbside isn't forever, but I think some of the lessons we've learned at curbside will be things about how do we reimagine and constantly innovate all the touch points with practices. Whether we talked about that texting or text to pay, But in general, I don't think we have as big a problem in our industry. Once we get you in the exam room, it's pretty good. The challenge is the other 364 days, and that person who is up to here with life. How do I make it real easy? Bracky talked about this at a VMX conference a couple of years ago. The key is, how do you make it much easier for your customers to do business with you?
Mhm.
And we in our profession need to challenge ourselves to forget everything you know about veterinary practices. And it doesn't matter if you're better than you were 5 or 10 years ago. The bar that your clients are measuring you against, like it or not, is Amazon,
Yeah.
it's Uber, it's Facebook, it's all these other
Yeah.
brands that are in their life all day long and they love them. And if doing business with their vet is like walking into a 10-year time warp, that's what creates that delta between what your client should be doing, that compliance delta. Why do they drift off into that ether? It's hard to do business with you and my pet looks okay.
Right.
Those are two big challenges.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Because you don't know what you don't know. And clients, in some of the studies that people have done about curbside, clients want to come back in the practice. And that's a good thing. I mean, they want the human interaction, and we all do. The veterinarians, I think, want the same thing. I have laughed because there are some managers going, no, we kind of like it that they're not in here because we've developed efficiencies. We found that, a lot of the pampering of our clients has slowed us down a lot. But I think that we will keep things. And I wrote about this in a blog last week, that there are things that we learned that are efficient and that are helpful. And if you're talking about meeting a client where they want to be, well, if I have a client who doesn't want to come in my building, maybe because they're handicapped, maybe because they're elderly, maybe because their dog is unruly and they can't handle it, then why wouldn't I accommodate them for curbside? Absolutely, I can do that. And I know how to do it because I have a process now that I didn't have before. So there's things that we put into place that we probably won't lose. And drop off care, again, I think is another big plus. We have the kennel space. We have clients who are busy, going back to the office. If they do go back to the office or going back to their jobs, then why wouldn't we accommodate them by putting drop offs? It's one of the efficiencies of all band fields is that all those wellness exams that they include with their packages are mandatory drop-offs because why they're worked in around other things. And so there's an efficiency to drop-off work that, we're not paying attention to. Um, allowing clients to make appointments. I miss traveling, but honestly, I could not travel without the Marriott app and the American Airlines app. And I don't talk to any people. I make my own arrangements. I fix those things, when I have glitches in my travel, and they're so easy. And we need to accommodate our clients when they want to do that same thing rather than actually having to call and say, well, let me put you on hold. Let me see what day I have. Let me see what, this will work. So I think we have those, and those things are available. I mean, they are out there and we can do it. We just need to do it. We need to do it. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for your time today. It's always a pleasure. We always have a good time talking veterinary medicine and business. That's our favorite things to talk about. I will absolutely have information about how to get in touch with you and Vitus Vet at the end of the app and in the description of the vodcast. And I encourage people to at least get a demonstration. You have now a pay app, Vitus Pay, that really solves another curbside problem by allowing people to pay through a tablet that's secure. And I think there's a lot of good things that Vitus Vet does that would help practices accomplish the goals we've talked about. To be more efficient, to be where their people want to be, to be customer centric rather than company centric. Yeah.
Right.
All right. So I appreciate your time, Mark, and we'll sign off. And thank you very much for getting out of your introvert shell, spending some time with us today.